The night was quiet, too quiet for the hills that surrounded Keanu Reeves's home. The stars above seemed brighter than usual, but their beauty carried no warning of what was about to happen. In the stillness, there was a sudden sound, a faint crackle that grew louder with each second. Keanu, sitting in his living room with only a single lamp on, lifted his head. He knew that sound. It was fire. He rushed to the window, his heart pounding, and what he saw made his chest tighten. Flames were rising on the slope just beyond his home, licking the dry trees like hungry beasts. The fire was spreading fast, too fast for the night to hold back. In seconds, the warm wooden beams of his house began to glow with the cruel reflection of the approaching flames. Keanu's first thought was not about his cars, not about his wealth, not about the awards on his shelves. It was about something far smaller, something no one else would understand. Upstairs in a quiet corner lay a small wooden chest. It had been with him for decades, a gift from his mother, filled with letters, sketches, and pieces of memory that had carried him through lonely nights. It was not valuable to the world, but to him it was priceless. But the fire was merciless. Smoke already drifted into the hallway. The walls groaned as heat pressed against them. Keanu coughed, his throat burning, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic was useless now. He ran up the stairs, each step heavier than the last as smoke wrapped around his body like a choking fog. Inside the room, the chest sat quietly, almost glowing under the dim light, as if it had been waiting for this moment. He bent down and lifted it, the weight not just in wood but in memories. He held it close to his chest, as if he were holding a fragile life. Downstairs, the fire had already begun its cruel dance along the walls. The photographs on the mantel curled into black ash, the curtains lit like torches. Keanu pushed forward, his bare feet stinging against the hot floor. The house that had once been his shelter was now a trap. As he reached the front door, a beam above cracked loudly and fell. For a moment, the way out was blocked, and the chest nearly slipped from his arms. But he refused to let go. He pressed forward, kicking the burning wood aside, his skin scraping, his lungs begging for air. Then, with one final push, he burst into the open night. The world outside was no safer. Neighbors were shouting, sirens echoed from a distance, and the air was filled with sparks floating like cruel stars. He stood barefoot on the dirt, holding the chest close. Behind him, his home, the place that had kept his secrets, his joys, his sorrows, was now a wall of fire. People rushed to him. One neighbor placed a hand on his shoulder, asking if he was hurt. Firefighters yelled for everyone to move back. Keanu could only nod, still silent, still clutching the chest as if it were his last anchor to the life he knew. In that moment, he felt a strange calm. Everything else was gone. The furniture, the clothes, the comfort, all of it turned to ash. But he had saved what mattered. Not because it was expensive, not because it was rare, but because it carried the story of who he was, the journey that had shaped him. The fire roared louder, and the night sky turned orange, but Keanu did not look away. He understood something that many people forget. A home can burn, possessions can vanish, but respect for memories, humility in loss, resilience in crisis, and kindness toward others, these are flames no fire can ever destroy. Yet deep inside, he also knew this was not the end of the story. The fire had taken more than just wood and stone. It had opened a door to something larger, something unexpected. What that was, he could not yet see. But as he stood barefoot in the dirt, chest in his arms, he felt that life had just given him a test, one that would reveal truths he had never imagined. And somewhere in the smoke, hidden in the chaos, the first hint of that truth was waiting. The fire trucks finally arrived, their sirens cutting through the night like a cry of urgency. Water gushed from heavy hoses, but the flames were too strong, too wild, as if they had been waiting for this chance to consume everything. Keanu stood with his chest in his arms, watching as strangers fought a battle he could not fight. His body was trembling, not from fear, but from the shock of seeing his life reduced to smoke. Neighbors gathered around him. Some whispered, some offered blankets, others simply stared at the sight of the man they all knew but never really knew. To them, he was the actor, the star, the figure from the screen. But tonight, he was only a man standing barefoot in the dirt, holding on to memories while the rest turned to ash. A firefighter approached him, shouting over the roar of the flames. "Sir, is anyone else inside?" Keanu shook his head, his throat too raw from smoke to speak. The firefighter nodded and rushed back, his boots sinking into the ground as the heat pushed him forward. Keanu tried to breathe slowly, but each inhale reminded him of what he had lost. Yet while the fire burned, something inside him grew calm. He looked at the chest in his arms, the wood slightly scorched at the edges, but still whole. He thought of the letters inside, his mother's handwriting, fragile and fading but alive. He thought of the sketches he made as a young boy, dreams drawn on paper when the world felt too big for him. Each page was a reminder of a journey, a struggle, a truth. But then, just as he let himself rest in that memory, a new sound rose above the chaos. A loud crack, followed by a scream. Keanu's head turned sharply toward the far side of the burning house. There, beyond the collapsing beams, someone was trapped. A neighbor, a young man, had rushed in to save something and was now caught in the flames. Without thinking, Keanu handed the chest to the nearest person, whispering, "Hold this." His body moved before his mind could argue. He ran toward the burning structure, ignoring the shouts of firefighters, ignoring the fear clawing at the edges of his chest. All he saw was the face of someone helpless, someone in need. The smoke wrapped around him like a heavy blanket, the heat clawing at his skin. But Keanu pushed forward, his arms raised to shield his face. Inside, the young man was coughing, his hands flailing, his eyes wide with terror. Keanu grabbed him by the shoulders, pulling him hard toward the broken doorway. A beam cracked above them, falling just inches from where they stood. The ground trembled, the air screamed, but Keanu did not let go. He dragged the young man step by step, each movement a fight against fire itself. Finally, with a last push, they stumbled out into the night. The crowd gasped, and firefighters rushed to cover the young man with a blanket. Keanu fell to his knees, his lungs burning, his arms trembling. He felt hands on his back, voices calling his name, but he did not care about recognition. All he cared about was that the boy was alive. The young man's mother came running, tears streaking down her face, and she held her son as if she would never let go. She looked at Keanu with eyes full of gratitude and whispered, "Thank you. You saved him." Keanu only nodded, his face dark with soot, his hair damp with sweat. And in that moment, something shifted. The fire was no longer just destruction. It was also a stage, a test of who he was when everything else was stripped away. Keanu realized that what he had chosen to save was not only the chest of memories, but also the life of a stranger. The flames still roared, but the world around him felt quiet. Humility wrapped around him like a cloak, not for what he had lost, but for what he had gained. Respect from his neighbors, resilience in his own heart, kindness shared in a moment of crisis. But deep inside, there was still an unease. He had saved what mattered most to him, and he had saved a life. Yet something about the fire felt different, almost unnatural. The way it spread, the speed, the sudden burst of power, it did not feel like an accident. As he looked at the ashes of his home, a thought whispered in the back of his mind. Was this fire truly nature's anger, or was there something else behind it? The morning after the fire was quiet in a strange way. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke, and the ground was littered with ash, blackened wood, and pieces of memories too broken to be saved. Firefighters had left hours earlier, leaving behind only a warning that the place was no longer safe. Keanu stood barefoot on the damp earth, the chest still in his arms, and looked at what remained of his home. The house was gone. Only the frame of a wall stood crooked against the sky, like the skeleton of a life that had once been whole. Neighbors came and went, some offering words of comfort, some bringing food, others only whispering from a distance. They could not understand the weight pressing on his heart. Yet what unsettled him most was not the loss itself. It was the memory of the fire, the way it had moved, the speed with which it had devoured everything. It felt wrong. Fires were wild, yes, but this one felt guided, almost pushed by an unseen hand. As he looked at the ruins, he could not shake the thought that it had been no accident. Later that day, an investigator arrived, a man with a heavy notebook and tired eyes. He walked slowly around the ashes, kneeling to touch the blackened soil, pausing to study the broken beams. Keanu watched silently, his chest resting at his feet. After a long while, the man approached. His voice was low, steady. "Sir, it may take days to confirm, but this fire, it doesn't look natural." Keanu's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" The man's gaze was firm. "There are signs, the burn patterns, the way it spread. I believe it was started deliberately. Someone set this fire." The words struck harder than the flames had. Keanu felt the ground tilt under him. Someone had destroyed his home. Someone had put lives in danger. The boy he had saved could have died. His neighbors could have lost everything. This was not just loss. It was an attack. That night, Keanu sat alone on the curb, the chest beside him, staring at the dark hills. The stars above looked cold, indifferent. Questions crowded his mind. Who would do this? Why target him? Was it envy, anger, or something even darker? But before fear could take hold, he reminded himself of something his mother once told him when he was a child. "In the darkest times, you must be the calm. Storms pass, but character remains." He placed a hand on the chest, whispering to himself, "I will not let this break me." Still, the unease grew. In the days that followed, he noticed shadows in places they should not be. A car parked too long near the ruins. Footsteps fading when he turned to look. Calls that ended with silence. The world around him was no longer just ash and grief. It was suspicion, danger, and unanswered questions. His neighbors tried to comfort him, but he felt something heavy inside. It was not just about him anymore. Someone had chosen fire as their weapon, and that meant others could be at risk too. One evening, as he stood at the edge of the blackened ruins, a voice broke the silence. "You were lucky that night." Keanu turned sharply. A stranger stood near the trees, half hidden in the shadows. His tone was calm, but his eyes carried something cold. "Who are you?" Keanu asked, his voice steady, though his heart raced. The stranger tilted his head, almost smiling. "Someone who knows the fire was only the beginning." Then, without another word, the man stepped back into the darkness and was gone. Keanu's fists clenched, his mind racing. The fire had not just destroyed his home. It had opened a door to something deeper, something far more dangerous. The chest at his side suddenly felt heavier, as if it carried not only memories, but also a key to a mystery he had not yet unlocked. The flames had taken much, but they had also given him a purpose. He would not run. He would not hide. He would face whatever truth lay in the shadows, no matter how painful, no matter how dangerous. The words of the stranger echoed in Keanu's mind for nights that followed. The fire was only the beginning. They replayed again and again, louder than the crackle of the flames he still heard in his dreams. Sleep became shallow, his rest broken by sudden jolts awake, his body covered in sweat. Each time his eyes went to the chest resting near his bed, as if it were a silent witness, as if it too knew something was coming. The police visited often, asking questions, taking notes, but their answers were few. They spoke of suspects, of motives, of waiting for evidence, but their words felt hollow. Keanu sensed they were searching in the dark, while whoever had done this was already steps ahead. One evening, as he walked the edge of the ruins alone, he bent down to pick up a piece of charred wood. It broke easily in his hand, crumbling like dust. Beneath it, his fingers touched something harder, cooler. He pulled it free and found a small metal object, half melted but still recognizable. It was not part of his home. It looked like a fuel canister, blackened and twisted. Someone had left it there. Someone had wanted him to find it. His chest grew heavy. This was not just destruction. It was a message. He carried the object to the investigators, but they gave him the same answer. "We will look into it." Still, their eyes told him what their mouths would not say. They had no clear trail. Keanu sat in silence that night, staring at the chest. He opened it slowly, his fingers brushing the letters and sketches inside. He thought of his mother's words, her voice soft but strong, telling him that kindness could still hold power even in the darkest of times. But he also thought of the stranger's face, his calm warning. Kindness alone would not stop this. The days turned into weeks, and though the fire had been put out, the storm around it grew. Whispers reached him from people he barely knew. Someone claimed to have seen a figure watching his house days before the fire. Another spoke of men in suits who asked questions about him in places he never went. Even friends seemed uneasy, as if they knew more than they dared to say. Then one afternoon, as the sun burned high, a letter arrived. No name, no address, only his written across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words short and sharp. "You saved what mattered to you, but can you save what matters to them?" His hands trembled as he read. The meaning was clear. This was no longer about him alone. Someone was watching not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. The young man he had pulled from the fire, his neighbors, even strangers who had offered help. They were all pieces in a game he had not chosen to play. Keanu folded the letter slowly, his jaw set. Fear tried to creep into him, but he pushed it down. This was no time to break. This was the moment to stand taller. The fire had stripped him of comfort, but it had also stripped away illusion. He could now see clearly. Someone wanted to test him, to push him, to break him. But he would not bend. That night, he walked through the ruins once more. The air was cool, the stars distant, and the earth beneath his feet was black with ash. He stood in the center of what had once been his living room and whispered into the silence, "If you want me, I am here, but I will not let you touch them." From the darkness of the trees, a sound answered him. Not words, not a voice, but the low hum of an engine. A car started, headlights flashing for a brief second before vanishing into the distance. They were watching. They had always been watching. Keanu turned back toward the chest, waiting quietly in the shadows. For the first time, he wondered if the memories inside were not only treasures, but also targets. What if the fire had not been meant to destroy, but to uncover? What if there was something inside the chest that someone wanted? The thought chilled him. He sat down, opened the chest again, and carefully lifted each letter, each sketch, each scrap of his past. His hands paused on one envelope, thicker than the rest, sealed and yellowed with age. He had never opened it. His mother had given it to him years ago, telling him only, "When the time is right." With trembling fingers, Keanu broke the seal. Inside were several handwritten pages, and at the bottom, a single line that stopped his breath. "If you are reading this, it means the world has finally found you." The words on the page seemed to burn brighter than the flames that had taken his home. If you are reading this, it means the world has finally found you. Keanu sat frozen, the envelope trembling in his hands. His mother's handwriting was soft and familiar, yet the message carried a weight he had never imagined. His eyes moved across the first page, each word pulling him deeper into a truth he was not ready for. His mother wrote of a time long before fame, long before the world knew his name. She spoke of people she once trusted, people who lived in the shadows of power. She warned him that one day they would return, and when they did, they would use fire, fear, and silence to bend him. Keanu's breath grew shallow as he turned to the next page. It was not only about him. His mother spoke of something hidden, a secret she had carried with her and passed to him without his knowing. The chest, the very object he had risked his life to save, was not only a container of memories. It was a vault of truth. Somewhere among the letters and sketches there was a document, one that could expose people who had built their lives on lies. His chest tightened. Suddenly the fire made sense. It had not been anger nor random chance. It had been a hunt. Someone had wanted the chest, and when they could not take it quietly, they tried to burn everything until only ashes remained. Keanu leaned back, the night air pressing against his skin. The house was gone. His safety was gone. But in his arms lay something more powerful than either. He whispered, almost to himself, "They were never after me. They were after this." In the days that followed, he searched every corner of the chest, every fold of paper, every page his mother had saved. And then, hidden inside a sketch of his childhood, he found it. A folded sheet, old but strong, filled with names, dates, and numbers. A map of corruption that stretched far beyond what he had ever imagined. His hands shook as he read. People in high places, leaders who shaped laws, men who built empires, all tied together by shadows. His mother's letter explained only one thing clearly. You must decide what to do with this truth. It can destroy you, or it can set others free. Keanu felt the weight of choice press upon him. To reveal the truth meant danger, not just for himself, but for everyone he loved. To hide it meant living under threat, knowing the fire would return, knowing more lives might be lost. Yet even in his turmoil, he remembered the night of the fire. He remembered saving the boy, the tears of his mother, the gratitude in her eyes. That was the kind of life he wanted to live. One where kindness had power, one where protecting others was worth the cost. But fear is stubborn. It whispered in his mind when he tried to sleep. What if they came again? What if this time he could not save anyone? What if they turned their eyes to the innocent? The choice grew heavier each day. He carried the chest with him wherever he went, never leaving it alone, never letting it out of sight. He began noticing the same car parked near the street at odd hours, the same faces watching from corners. They were closing in, waiting for him to make a mistake. One evening, as the sun set and shadows stretched long, there was a knock at his door. Not the quick knock of a friend, but the steady, measured rhythm of someone who wanted to be heard. Keanu opened it slowly, his chest close by. Standing there was the same stranger who had spoken to him near the ruins of his house. His eyes were calm, his posture unshaken. "You found it," the man said softly. Keanu's grip on the door tightened. "What do you want?" The man's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "The truth is dangerous, but silence is worse. They will not stop. Not until you give them what they want." "And what if I don't?" Keanu asked, his voice low, steady. The man stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "Then you must be ready to fight for every soul who will suffer in their hands. This is no longer about your home, or even about you. It is about what happens when a man chooses to stand. And with that, he handed Keanu a small card. No name, only a time and a place. Tomorrow night, if you want answers, be there. Then he walked away, fading into the darkness like a shadow that had never been real. Keanu closed the door slowly, his heart heavy with the weight of the chest. He looked again at the papers, at his mother's words, and at the faces of those he had promised himself to protect. He knew he could not turn back now. The fire had destroyed his home, but the truth inside the chest could destroy everything else. The night came heavy with silence. The card in Keanu's hand had given only a time and a place, an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city. He carried the chest with him, wrapped in a simple cloth, his heart steady but his mind alert. Every step felt like a test, every shadow like a watcher. The closer he came, the more he felt the weight of what was about to happen. Inside, the warehouse was dim, its walls lined with broken crates and rusted steel. The air smelled of dust and oil, a forgotten place chosen for secrets. In the center stood a table, and around it 3 men in dark suits. Their eyes followed Keanu as he entered, sharp and cold, as if they had already measured the worth of his soul. One of them spoke first, his voice smooth but cruel. "You have something that does not belong to you." Keanu held the chest firmly. "This was given to me by my mother. It belongs to me, and the truth inside it belongs to everyone." The man's smile faltered. "You don't understand. You are playing with fire, and this time no one will save you." Keanu stepped closer, his eyes unwavering. "I lost my home, but I did not lose myself. You burned everything I had, and still I stand here. You think fire can break me, but all it did was show me who I am." For a moment the room was silent. Then, from the shadows, another figure stepped forward, the stranger who had given him the card. His tone was calm, but it carried weight. "He understands more than you think. The question is whether you understand what comes next." The men in suits shifted uneasily. The stranger placed a hand on the chest, his gaze locked with Keanu's. "It is your choice. You can give this to them and walk away, or you can let the truth rise and know they will come for you again and again." Keanu thought of the fire, the boy he had saved, the neighbors who had stood with him, the kindness his mother had taught him. He thought of the letters in the chest, words written with love, carrying wisdom that had shaped his life. He thought of every face that would suffer if silence won. His decision was clear. He turned to the men and said, "I will not give this to you. The truth is not yours to bury. It belongs to those who have lived in your shadows for too long." Their eyes darkened, rage flashing like sparks. One of them moved forward, but the stranger raised his hand, stopping them. "Enough," he said. "This man has chosen. And once a man has chosen truth, no fire can silence him." The men exchanged glances, their anger sharp, but they did not advance. Instead, they stepped back into the darkness, their threats lingering in the silence. The warehouse grew still again, leaving only Keanu, the chest, and the stranger. Keanu's shoulders dropped, the weight of the moment pressing on him. "Why help me?" he asked quietly. The stranger's eyes softened. "Because the world needs men who remember that respect is stronger than fear, that resilience survives when all else burns, and that kindness, even in the face of cruelty, is the greatest power of all." With that, the stranger turned and walked away, leaving Keanu standing in the dim light, the chest still safe in his arms. Days later, the truth inside the chest reached the world. Papers were published, names exposed, corruption laid bare. People who once lived untouched by law now faced the weight of justice. The fire that had destroyed Keanu's home became the spark that lit a greater flame, one that brought light to hidden places. And through it all, Keanu remained the same, humble, quiet, and steady. He rebuilt not just his home, but his life, brick by brick, with the same calm strength he had always carried. Neighbors remembered the night he saved a life. Strangers remembered the day he stood for truth, and those closest to him remembered that even in the ashes, he chose kindness first. The fire had taken much, but it had also revealed more. It showed that what we carry inside, our respect, our humility, our resilience, our kindness, cannot be burned. They are the true treasures, the ones worth saving, the ones worth holding even when everything else is lost. Keanu looked once more at the chest, now resting safely in his new home. It was not just wood, not just paper, not just memory. It was a reminder that sometimes life destroys what you know, not to end you, but to reveal who you really are. And in that truth, Keanu found peace.